Hi everyone and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So today we are starting a lot of annual flower seeds, and so I've prepared my seed starting mix, which is 2 parts cocoa coir, 1 part vermiculite, 1 part perlite, some osmocote for all my annual flowers that I put in here, as well as the mosquito bits, which I rave about on my channel. Really great to prevent fungus gnats. It's helpful. It may not completely stop them. It only kills the baby larva, and it works for about 2 weeks. You can always reapply if you need to, but it's been super handy in controlling fungus gnats in my seed starting setup, and that's why I always recommend it. So we are starting a ton of annual flower seeds this year. This is more annual flower seeds than I've ever started, and to be honest, I may regret my life choices in 4 to 6 weeks, but hopefully our weather cooperates this year and we don't have any really late frost and I can get these out into the garden earlier. I don't know at this point whether I'll have to pot them up. I probably will. I'm using these new 50 count trays from Bootstrap Farmer here, and I've already put in my tags that I've made. I'll go over the varieties that I'm planting briefly. Some of them I've grown before. A lot of them are seeds that I purchased several years ago. And I just never got around to planting because I hate potting stuff up. So it's been a detriment to me as far as my seed starting for annuals. One thing also is annual flower seeds don't tend to germinate as well for me, and I think that's pretty typical for most people. And I am also combining lots of different types in these 50 cell trays, and so some may germinate earlier than others. It may cause issues regarding the humidity dome and whether I need to keep those on or take those off. But I have a ton of varieties here. The ones I want to go over first are the Black-Eyed Susans. I got them from Floret Flower 2 years ago, so last year was the first year I grew them, so it's only been a year and a couple months because I ordered them all in January. But I have a beautiful picture on my Instagram of some Black-Eyed Susans that I grew from her. And the one I love so much is called Prairie Sun, and it is just a beautiful yellow. I'm going to try and stick the names, since there's so many of these, in the description below so you can check those out. Some of these I've also got pictures on my Instagram of, but we have Prairie Sun, Black-Eyed Susan, Sahara Black-Eyed Susan, which is a beautiful red-orange color Black-Eyed Susan, Denver Daisy Black-Eyed Susan, which is really nice, and Cherry Brandy, which is also really beautiful Black-Eyed Susan. So those are the ones that I was really focusing on growing the most of. So I have 12 here in this tiny tray of the 2 of my favorites of the Black-Eyed Susans, which was Prairie Sun and Sahara that I grew last year. And then I have 2 rows of the other Black-Eyed Susans here, so that'll be 10 a piece. So if they germinate well and I have good germination, that will be a great annual cut flower for me. One thing about Black-Eyed Susans, these specifically, is I didn't know last year when I was growing them that they are perennial in a lot of zones. And so although they may be designated as annual flower seeds, I want you to check and Google the zones on some of these, because some of these you can plant somewhere where you might stick a perennial and it will come back year after year. I've actually noticed, although these didn't thrive as good for me last year, that I did not pull them out of the ground when I was doing my cleanup in the fall, because I did see that some of them were perennial, and I'm actually seeing some new growth early spring. So that's really exciting for me, especially the Prairie Sun, which was my favorite, beautiful yellow. And so you can actually sometimes order these online as perennials as well. And so just be cognizant of a lot of the things I'm showing you are truly annuals, but the Black-Eyed Susans in particular could be perennials in your zone, so check those out. I'm growing several Coleuses this year. I've never grown Coleus from seed. One is Sunset Wizard, the other is Golden Wizard, which is a beautiful just gold color. And I have one more in here, it's Palisandra. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing any of these seeds correctly, by the way. If I pronounce them wrong, forgive me. Palisandra is a beautiful purple Coleus. And so a lot of Coleuses need a part sun location. Proven Winners has bred some annual Coleus that will take full sun, which is really nice. That's another thing I wanted to mention about annual flower seeds, is they do not tend to be in my case and in my experience, the few times I've grown them, as productive as annual flowers that you will buy from the garden center. And that's because a lot of those annual flowers have been bred from tissue culture, and they've been bred to be super productive, and they're not grown from seed. And so some of these you will find are super productive. This Black-Eyed Susan Prairie Sun that I grew last year produced some beautiful flowers that stayed on there a really long time. It probably needed a little more sun than I gave it, and it could have been more productive. But as it perennializes, it'll produce more and more if it's a perennial in your garden. So keep a check on that. Dichondra Silver Falls, which is a beautiful draping foliage plant that I intend to use in some containers this year. Verbena vervain, which I went over in January when I ordered this, or in a video a couple weeks ago. I love verbena, and so I'm growing 3 rows of it in this 50 pack. So that's a total of 15 plants. Hopefully they will germinate well for me. Ornamental mini mint, which I grew a couple years ago in a tiny little container. They're really beautiful to add to containers as like a little ground cover for the container. It spreads and creates this really thick mat and does a little draping later in the summer. But I loved it when I grew it a couple years ago, and I have a few seeds left, and so I'm just going to grow a couple rows of that to the extent I have enough. They're really tiny, and it doesn't sound like many are in here. So we'll just see what I have left over. China Aster Lady Coral, which is a beautiful coral color aster, and a dark opal basil, which I've grown before as well. I grew that last year. So I've got these kind of separated. That first set was the ones I'm growing a lot of that I'm really excited about. I'm actually getting some snapdragons started, and they're kind of late. I have not had prior great success with snapdragons, and so we're going to try Snapdragon Apple Blossom this year. Bells of Ireland, which also I don't know how much success I'll have with. They can be a little finicky from my understanding. So this last set of plants is a flat of plants that if they don't germinate well, I'm not going to be heartbroken about it. Celosia Pompous Plume, which looks like a beautiful different colored celosia here. Coral Reef Celosia, I have grown celosia before. It's beautiful in dried arrangement, and it produces a ton of seed in the garden. It's a really good option for you. Amaranth Red Spike is another type of beautiful amaranth that can get 3 to 4 foot tall and wide, and produces these really beautiful dark purple red colored flower heads, seed heads. And 2 carnations, King of Black and La France. One's pink, one's really, really dark purple, King of Blacks. So those are exciting. And then I have Mahogany Splendor Hibiscus. And so these are great for cutting, and they're just a beautiful Japanese maple type foliage in the garden. They do get pretty big. They're an annual hibiscus, not a perennial, and so 3 to 4 foot tall and wide. I'm going to grow 4 of them, or at least get 4 started. I will probably not end up putting all of those in my garden because I don't have the space for a plant that large. But I might end up sticking it back in the mini orchard this year. I'm going to try and do some things differently in that space and get some more production out of that space this year if I have time. So we'll see. I may stick it somewhere else, but for right now, we're just going to get started. I'm going to plan up all of these in order, and then I will go over how we're going to treat these next. So I'm only going to put, because I am growing so many of these individual cell packets, 1 in each container so I don't have to trim any out, and hope I have good germination. If I don't have the best germination, I will just have leftover seed cell trays, and that'll just be a sign for Matthew, you need to cool it. You've got enough stuff to do in the spring rather than take care of all of these seeds you're starting. So that's what the method I'm doing right now anyway. If I get more than 1 in a cell tray, it's not the end of the world. These seeds are also really tiny in a lot of cases, so just do what we can. But I like to not waste seeds so I can have them for years to come, because flower seeds in particular are more expensive than vegetable seeds, and so I don't want to be wasteful and just have to trim out extra seedlings. There's 1 tiny cell tray. I'm going to go ahead and cover this one with vermiculite, like I do all my cell trays. A light coating in this instance, and that one's good to go. We'll stick it under the grow lights. I will moisten the top of this first just to keep the vermiculite moist. That way the seed has moisture all around it to get germinated well, and so we don't have any issues with the seed casing drying after germination and having issues with the cotyledons opening. There we go, you can actually see what I'm doing a little better there. All right, all the Coleuses now. So I've never grown Coleus from seed, but Soil and Margaritas has, and if you're not following her channel, she grows a lot of things from seed and has just a really beautiful garden in Indiana. So she's technically in zone 5, so one zone lower than me, but she grew Coleus from seed at least last year and probably before then, and I was really enamored with how beautiful it did from seed, so we're going to try that this year. Now these seeds are super, super tiny. You can buy pelleted seed, but a lot of times it's more expensive and you don't get as many seeds, so sometimes we just have to deal with the tiny seed if we want a lot of seeds. The most bang for our buck. I'm not going to recommend any companies to get your seeds from. I've tried several. I've had good luck with all of them. One of the companies that a lot of these seeds came from is no longer selling to the average consumer, and they're only selling wholesale and thousands of seeds at a time. So just find one that looks reputable and go with them. So Coleus should not be covered. The seeds just need to be pressed into the surface of the soil. And so I am going to put a little vermiculite over them just to maintain some of that moisture and a little more contact with the seed for the soil, but I'm not going to cover it as much as I typically would in any of my other seedlings. This is the purple, really dark Coleus, which would be really lovely in containers, which is where I tend to put a lot of my Coleus. I have had really good luck with Coleus in the ground around here, even though I haven't had a lot of luck with other annuals in the ground because of our heavy clay soil. But Coleus is one that's done really well for me in some locations, and so I'm excited to give that a try this year. It's more difficult to get these into the pack than it is to keep them, so we're going to throw this one away because I just used all the seeds. All right, a little vermiculite. The Coleus is from here over, so we're just going to very lightly put some of that on top. And then a little more over the Rudbeckias. All right, 2 down, 2 more to go. So this one has the Verbena, basil, the aster, silver falls, and mini mint. So this has got a lot of things. Half of it is going to be things that are trailing that will probably need to be potted up, and the other half is stuff that will grow upwards, and so this will be a weird mix, but we're going to give it a try. Opal basil, I assume you can eat it. I've never tried, but it looks really excellent in the landscape and in arrangement, so that's primarily the reason I'm growing it. And the basil seeds are much larger, so it's easy to deal with. So this Dichondra Silver Falls says there's only 10 seeds in here completely, and I have 10 packets here, so that's going to be roughly 1 per container. This was exactly 10 seeds. It makes you wonder how these companies do such a good job at counting these seeds like that on such a small scale. All right, the asters, just a few of. I've never grown asters from seed, so everything in this tray, other than the basil and the mint, I've never grown from seed, but these are a lot of seeds, and these came from florets, so they've got to be absolutely beautiful. Some of these I may try direct sowing if I don't get a good germination from seed starting them. So I'm growing 3 rows of this one. Verbena is really lovely. I love my color palette in my garden, of course, has purple in it, so it's always one that I'm super interested in getting in the garden. All right, and then we have mini mint, which I have planted before, and I don't even have but 4 seeds in here, so we're not going to be able to do a whole tray of that. We'll do part of a row. So when I'm not seeing any germination from all of these rows, remind me that we only have 1 seed per row. This is multi-pelleted seed. Mint seeds are super, super tiny, and so this has multiple seeds in a little clay pellet. And so since I couldn't get a whole row there, I'm actually going to sow more of this verbena because I have lots of those seeds. So I will make a extra tag down here at the end so I don't forget that that one is verbena. So first I'm going to do the Mahogany Splendor Hibiscus. These are just the regular trays that I would normally start peppers and tomatoes in. And then I have this little purple container, which also came from Bootstrap Farmer a couple years ago. It was one of the first things I bought. It's nice to start herbs in because you can kind of scatter seeds in there and pluck them out and pot them up. I just find that I don't like potting things up, and so I don't use them a whole lot, but they hold these little cell containers much better. So we're going to, there's not many seeds in here. I'll do 2 per container here. These seeds are actually pretty big, and so I'm actually going to put them in. Typically you want to put seeds down twice as far as they are wide, and I just plant a lot of seeds that are really fine, and so the vermiculite does fine, but in instances, just covering with vermiculite does fine, but in instances like this, where the seeds are a little bigger, you do want to get them covered, and so let's cover those a little bit, add our vermiculite anyway, and then these are done. We'll move on to our last tray. All right, this one has the amaranth, the red spike amaranth, coral reef, coleus, black carnation, La France carnation, bells of Ireland, pampas purple, and snapdragons. So this is the one that if some of the seeds don't make it, don't germinate well, because I have had issues getting Celosia to germinate in the past. In fact, when I grew it 2 or 3 years ago, it never germinated for me at all in the basement. And so what I did was I just took it outside in the spring and neglected it, and all of a sudden it started coming up in its containers. And then I got it planted out, and it did really well after it got planted out, but I never got germination in the basement for some reason. But I am not an expert growing Celosia either. Some of these I'm being a little more liberal with because these seeds are several years old. So this seed packet for Bells of Ireland says have patience really erratic germination, which I've heard about for Bells of Ireland. Generally, the seeds are really interesting and they look like little pyramids, and so I'm going to be kind of generous and use up all the seed because it is kind of old to begin with. And these seeds are actually kind of large. So Bells of Ireland's a really interesting thing to add to arrangements. It's this beautiful green, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like tubes of beautiful green, and so we're going to go really heavy since it says germination's erratic, and I'm putting probably 5 or more seeds per container here, and if we have to cut some out, that's fine. These are also pretty large seeds, so I'm just going to press them in gently. And last, snapdragons. I haven't had great success with snapdragons either, but we're just going to give a few a try in this tray with all this other stuff that may erratically germinate. Little vermiculite on top, a little heavier over these. All right, everyone, that's it. We are going to be starting more seeds in about 2 weeks, the middle of March. I may wait another week because I got a little behind on these, and I want to keep my seed starting pretty even. So I typically do 8 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks. So it'll be 2 more weeks before I start more seeds. We're going to get these misted over under my utility sink with my mister, and then I'm going to put humidity domes on. I only have 2 big humidity domes, so I'm going to select the 2 that I like most, which will probably not be this tray, and get humidity domes over those, and hopefully we'll have some good germination here in a little bit. This is an experiment for me, and I wanted to bring you all along for it. If you follow me on Instagram, I will be posting in my stories as these germinate. I also recently started a Facebook page, the Southerners Northern Garden on Facebook, and those Instagram stories also get published there as stories. I know not everyone has Instagram, and a lot of my viewers don't. And so if you have Facebook, you can follow along on Facebook by liking my page there. So thank you guys for joining me. Stick around, lots of great things coming this spring. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Bye.